Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership and co-chair of Denver Startup Week. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. DSW has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade. And this week, we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible, our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, our designer track sponsor, Battery 621, and the Public Works, people track sponsor, Exactly, and spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement to the week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage, Path, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors, all listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our hybrid Denver Startup Week. And don't forget, use the hashtag DenStartupWeek to share your experiences and moments of inspiration on social media. Have a great week.
Yeah.
Hey boss, Mountain West Q2 forecast, 2.3 million.
Nice. Are you kidding me? Come on.
Ugh, another one.
Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Emma. We are the People Track co-chairs and members of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee.
As a committee, we feel it's important we acknowledge Indigenous people as the original owners of the land on which we reside, which is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide, ethnic cleansing, forced removal, stolen land, and forced occupation of their territory. And we honor those who have stewarded this land throughout generations and all other indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. With that being said,
we thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or the combination of those identities.
There's something for everyone at Denver Startup Week. Thanks to all of our community members who submitted their best content to make this week happen.
Thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us keep Denver Startup Week free and accessible for all, especially our People Track sponsor, Exactly.
The People Track is about all things people. It encompasses the knowledge, insights, and values needed to build inclusive cultures, teams, and communities.
On that note, please enjoy this session and the entire Denver Startup Week.
Okay, I think it's time for us to get started now. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Heather McBride. I'm the Talent Ops Lead at Pi Insurance, and my pronouns are she, her. We are really excited to be bringing you the session today. I believe it's the first session after the kickoff, so welcome everyone to Denver Startup Week. And I will start by asking our panelists to introduce themselves, and I will go around. Let's start with Jolie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jolie Weatherspoon. My pronouns are she, her. I'm also with Pi Insurance. We are now, I believe, considered a growth stage company, which is very exciting. I was one of the first 50 people to join Pi, so seeing that we're now up to, I believe, 310 pioneers is really, really exciting. I believe we're hiring for all teams within Pi right now. I looked at our careers page this morning and it was pretty long scroll. We got a lot of growth going on. It's really exciting.
Awesome. Thanks, Jolie. Lizzie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Lizzie Enderly Tubrighty. My pronouns are she, her. I am the head of talent at AgentSync. We are a small but pretty fast growing startup here in Denver. We work in the insurtech space, building software that helps brokers and insurers connect. I joined last October. We were just under 30 people. We're now almost 100. So growing quite a bit, hiring across all teams, but especially in engineering and sales. So feel free to reach out, and we will be at the Career Fair Wednesday evening. So hopefully see you all there.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Thanks, Heather.
Mark.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Shafer. I work for Optum Digital, formerly known as Rally Health, but it's within the Optum and United Health ecosystem. Optum Digital, basically, it's where we are modernizing technology and operations to drive efficiencies within consumer healthcare products within the Optum and United Health ecosystem. So it's kind of a little technical incubator within UHG broadly. We're about 1,300 or so in size, and we're certainly growing a lot. So all engineering roles, and then also more general corporate and administrative type positions as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And Dan, you want to round us out?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Good to see everyone here. I'm Dan Snyder, head of talent at Pi. I love seeing this screen. I feel like we've sort of taken over with the Pi Insurance backgrounds, but excited to be here with Lizzie, Mark and Jolie. Pi, we are an insurtech also. We focus in the workers' comp space, specifically within SMBs. As Jolie said, so I think she's got me by a couple hundred hires, because I joined when we were right around 200 earlier this year in January, the start of the year, and we're now just I think close to 315, 320. So been a lot of growth for us, very exciting. Closed on our Series C round of funding back in March, and we're continuing to grow. Hoping to hit close to 400 by the end of the year. We are, as Jolie said, we're hiring across corporate functions, engineering, product. Being an insurance company, we do hire in areas such as underwriting, audit, claims. But yeah, we'll check out our careers page. We'll be at the fair on Wednesday, and excited to be here. So thanks, Heather.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you all so much. We will be putting contact information for each of us in the chat momentarily. So look out for that. And I just wanted to remind the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop those into the Q&A, and feel free to chat throughout the session. We'd love for this to be interactive. So we're going to start by walking through application and applying for a job from a candidate's point of view. So we'll start with first things first, right? A candidate sees their dream role on your job site. What recommendations do you have for them as they apply? What are you looking for in a resume or a cover letter that may get them noticed? And I'll throw this to Dan to start.
Cool. I will start by saying I feel like recruiting, talent acquisition, interviewing is like one of the most highly debated topics. You got to LinkedIn. Everyone has their opinion, right? So I'll share from my perspective, my experience. What I think stands out, and it starts with doing your research. There are, Pi, AgentSync, Optum Digital. We're just a tiny, chunk of companies hiring in this massive market. We're also in a candidate-driven market right now. So you could approach your job search by saying, there's this maybe specific industry that I want to get myself into, or maybe it's very, very role specific. Or maybe it's company size, growth stage. You've worked for a larger company and you want to try out, a smaller startup. So I think it's extremely important to do your research. When you see the job or you find the company, and maybe it's a company that you're really interested in, but they don't have the role open that you're looking for right now. It's still great to connect with people, build relationships. I mean, I think I would hope that everyone here is on LinkedIn. Find the people who work in that department, work in that team, connect with them. Share your interest in the company, in the space this company sits. So I think it's really important to do your research, build those connections. Specifically, when I think about cover letters, if you're looking to break into a space, a new function, that is a kind of prime time, use for a cover letter. I hire for recruiters on my team, and sourcers, recruiters. There's a lot of people who are interested in getting into the recruiting and the talent space who don't have that experience. If I see a resume with no industry or relevant experience, it's hard for me to understand why is this person interested. So it's not to say that you can't break into a new industry, but that's a great use for a cover letter to explain how your past experience could make you a good fit for a role in a new space. So I think that's a good starting point.
Nice, thanks, Dan. Lizzie, do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I think Dan covered so much good points and tips for people. So yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with what Dan said around just being really intentional if you are writing a cover letter and trying to break into a new industry. Or if you're trying to get into a startup and you've been working at maybe larger companies, tell that story of why you're curious about the company. And Dan mentioned this too, but I think the biggest thing you can do is connecting with folks who work there. So reach out, but show genuine interest, be respectful of people's time. But that is how a lot of our team has joined, by showing curiosity and connecting on LinkedIn and starting conversations. So that's definitely my number one recommendation. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Mark, do you have anything to add on this one?
I think mostly covered it, but being intentional, I think, is extremely important on career pages, regardless of the company. A lot of the times, if you'll have the opportunity to sign up for talent networks. And so if you don't see a job that's directly related to your skill set or that you're interested in, many companies have the ability to sign up for talent networks, which you'll get email updates, keep you updated on the business, the company, what they're doing. So you can quite literally track them for when the timing is right. But yeah, I think it's important to be intentional, especially in the candidate-driven market, and being prepared, and any sort of data that you can put on your resume is always important. Regardless of your skill set or your expertise, percentages and data and the specific successes that you can list out, I think, is important, which will then stand out to your dream recruiter, your dream company, your dream job, etc. So yeah, I think high level, it covers most everything.
I think
Awesome.
there's a few questions, Heather, in the Q&A that we could probably talk a little bit to. There was a question around applicant tracking systems, and I thought I would quickly touch on that one. So AgentSync uses Greenhouse. I'm not sure if all of you use Greenhouse, but when you apply, you'll get kind of a confirmation email that we received your application, and then we only have humans looking at resumes. So we aren't using any automation to weed out your candidacy for a job. So we take a look and we try to be really intentional in our job descriptions about what we're looking for. And sometimes get kind of specific with the search. So I think that's a good point. And then to answer another question I see in here about having an objective section on resumes. I don't love objective sections on resumes. They're okay, but I'd rather see in each of your job sections the story of what you've done and how you've really applied that in your role. If you can be data-driven and have numbers, that's awesome. Like if you're in a recruiting role, it's very similar to sales. So talk about how many positions you've filled, and the same for sales, talk about what your quota is. And if you achieved it within engineering, maybe talk about the product that you helped to build, and just give some really specific information there. So objective statements, unless you are trying to pivot into a new industry or role, I think they're unnecessary, but I don't know, Dan, Mark.
Yeah, I was just gonna, so we use, there's pretty much two very common applicant tracking systems in the startup world, Lever and Greenhouse. Pi currently uses Lever. They're all fairly similar. You know, I think the one thing that I can think of off the top of my head, particularly with higher, roles where you will see a higher volume of applicants, make sure that your resume is formatted well and is, ideally just convert it to a PDF if you can. Applicant tracking systems have a lot of abilities to, when you're, a recruiter may be looking through 10, 15, 50 applicants. There's a review sort of stage in an ATS. If your resume is not formatted, you have a gap between your name and then all the content, and there's a whole page missing, whatever it may be. If it's in, sometimes I see them in like a text format, and it doesn't kind of parse well into an ATS. That really, really little things like that to, I guess a plug for all the recruiters out there. It's their job, but it can be overwhelming sometimes, going through a lot of applicants, making sure that your resume, is formatted in a way that is attractive and readable is going to help you along the way. I think, I agree with Lizzie in terms of an objectives statement.
Nice. Thank you guys for answering that. Okay, so a candidate has successfully applied for the role, their cover letter, their resume has caught the attention at someone at your company. What's the number one thing that they can do to prepare for their first screen, whether it be with a hiring manager or with a recruiter? And Lizzie, I'll toss this one to you first.
Yeah, I think similar theme that we'll probably all keep saying is really be prepared. Do your homework on the company, who you're talking to. Even if it's an initial call with the recruiter, you have an opportunity to ask a lot of really great questions and learn more. And recruiters are going to spend a very efficient amount of time trying to understand if you are qualified for the role, if your values and what you're looking for align with the company's. So I think just be prepared to have really clear, concise answers. Think about what your own personal pitch is and your story of what you're looking for, and then let whoever's interviewing you lead the conversation. I think a good interviewer, it should feel really relaxed and more like a conversation, but a lot of interviewers have specific focus areas and things that they want to cover and that they have to cover to decide if you can move forward. So it's really hard when someone maybe goes into a very long story about their entire work history and background. And I think there's a lot of bias that comes in there. So I think the more you can really hone in, be prepared, and then let that person lead the conversation, the better.
Mark, do you have anything you want to add to this question?
I definitely agree with that. Be a good listener. I think it's important to understand it's okay to take notes, whether digitally on another screen or physically on a notepad, to answer the questions that potentially are asked precisely and to the point. Try not to ramble. But yes, being prepared, having your story outlined, practice it. We've all done it, I think. And so, practice your story. Don't have that conversation be the first time that you're trying to put it together. And have thoughtful questions as well. There's so many outlets, Glassdoor, of course, LinkedIn, Line, that you can look up the business, particular positions within a business, and see how that aligns with your strengths and your passions. And I think it's also important. This initial interview may not get that far, but from what are your professional weaknesses and strengths? The weaknesses question is probably a little bit more difficult to be prepared for, but I think it's a good area of interviewing that provides a good insight into your overall expertise. And so I think being prepared is cliche to say, but these various ways I think that you're able to do it and practicing your story can lead to success, and of course having great questions for the interviewer.
I just want to add to that, and I feel like this is going to be a common theme. The asking questions and the right questions, I think is hugely important. This whole topic around is how to nail your next interview, right? Nailing the interview is like one piece of the puzzle, and I think almost more importantly is throughout the interview process, putting yourself first. Evaluating the company against what you're looking for, not just in a role, in a culture. You have to take chances at the end of the day, right? Interviews are only so long, and you can only gather so much information. I feel like I've been thinking about this topic for a while now, and I read something on LinkedIn. It was talking about interviewers are nervous. I can't tell you how many times I've started to interview, jumped in an interview, and I've been super nervous myself. So think about it, if you think about it from that perspective, it probably helps calm your nerves a little bit. But making sure you're going into that interview to, hopefully that interviewer is leaving a sufficient amount of time for you to get questions answered yourself. But think about what it is that you really are looking for in a company, in a culture, in a role. Try to drill into those, make sure you're getting the right information to, assuming, and fingers crossed you make it to that next round. If it's the right fit, you can, and you get to an offer, you can really confidently, make the right decision. So that's the only other thing I would add.
I love that. I was going to add on from Dan. I think it's really funny when we talk about people being nervous. I think it's okay to say you're nervous in an interview and just create that space to be a person. I think a good and inclusive interviewer will help try to make sure that you feel comfortable. It's not supposed to be a trick. I don't think companies ask those trick questions anymore. At least I hope not. It's supposed to be an exploration of mutual alignment and good next step. And I think Cindy asked a question in here about reaching out to hiring managers directly. Definitely reach out to hiring manager directly. If you can tell, just be really intentional about how you communicate. I think be clear and specific in what you're looking for and that you're interested, and keep it short and concise. That way they can respond and just say, hey, that sounds great, let's chat. As opposed to many paragraph stories. So give your quick elevator pitch that you're interested in. I think you'll be good.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that from the audience. So we know most interviews these days are taking place over Zoom, virtual setting. What tips do you all have for the candidates to put their best foot forward in this setting? And Jolie, I will start with you here.
Yeah, we've kind of already touched on it in a couple other answers, but preparation is key, especially because Zoom is a little bit awkward. There's always that moment of, is the other person finished talking? Should I start responding? Something that's really big for me is if your dog or cat or guinea pig interrupts, I want to see them. it's not an apology situation. You should take that moment to enjoy it because we're all stuck at home. You got to make it fun when you can. But in terms of preparation, just having, prior accomplishments in mind so that when somebody asks for an example of, a time that you overcame a challenge in a project, that you can clearly and concisely say, I did X, Y, Z, and this was the result. Especially for the way that PI interviews, we're really looking for just kind of behavioral answers and us understanding how you confront challenges, knowing where you may have shortcomings that you would need your team or your leader to step in and help a little bit, and just really being yourself. Like I said, let us see your dog. We want to know who you are as a person. It's very important to us as a company that we can support you fully. And in order to do that, we really need to get a sense of who you are as well as what you can do.
Yeah.
I love that. It's very humanizing when you have a dog popping up in the background or your kid running by. Dan, do you have anything to add on this one?
Yeah, a lot of good points. Lizzie said this, we're all human, right? We're all, and everyone is in their different, their own setting, and working from home. Heather and I were joking, and we had a colleague who was working out of their closet for a little while. And I think the one thing that I would say is just be comfortable, try and put yourself in a comfortable situation. If you typically work from your bedroom, don't go work, from your kitchen table because you think the background is a little bit better. If your bed's going to be in the background, make sure it's made, and things are a little bit organized, and put yourself in a professional setting, but put yourself in a position where you're going to act yourself and act natural. I think setting expectations is really important. I work off of two screens. If I'm in an interview and I'm taking notes on one screen and my video is on the other screen, just, let the other person know that, hey, I'm taking down notes, probably not going to be looking you right in the eyes the entire interview. The other thing I would say is internet is not 100% reliable, as we all know. So try and have a backup plan. I know, on the coordination side of the house at PI and a lot of companies typically have a backup plan, right? If the internet, connection's not stable, make sure you have cell phone numbers to reach each other. I just saw a question pop up about wardrobe. Not all startups are created equal. I will tell you, for PI, for myself, be yourself, be comfortable. If that means that you typically wear a button up, wear a button up. If that means that you're in a jam band t-shirt, like our CTO is most of the time, wear that t-shirt. So just put yourself in a comfortable, and professional wardrobe.
I would also say that's a great question to ask whoever you're working with at the company. So if you're working with a coordinator or a recruiter, feel free to ask that question. It shows that you're interested and that you want to present yourself in a way that the interviewer will feel comfortable with too. So definitely reach out and ask your coordinator or your recruiter those kinds of questions. Okay, so Denver Startup Week, right? We're going to go kind of high level here. How do you all think interviewing for a startup differs from interviewing at a larger, more established corporation? And I'll start with Jolie here.
Yeah, as a hiring manager, I get asked about career paths a lot because we are, as a company, getting to that point where people have that expectation of, oh, if I come in as an underwriting associate, which is what my team is, what's the path to get to underwriting or get to renewals and all that kind of stuff? The answer is, it depends. We're still small enough. We don't have a lot of defined career paths, but one of the things that I've always really enjoyed as a leader is learning about my team, figuring out who they are, who they want to be, and how we're going to get them to those places. So the nice thing about not having those defined paths to get people where they want to go is if you have the talent and the dedication and the skill, you can move into those roles as fast as you want to. I've personally had a lot of success bringing people onto my team from other roles and then helping them promote out into other roles within PI. So it's honestly one of my favorite things is developing and mentoring somebody and then watching them leave me behind and go do something else within the company and do great things that way. So
that's awesome. Lizzie, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think Julie made a great point around just there aren't necessarily career paths and like very distinct ways that you can grow. But what's really amazing about that is you kind of get the opportunity to create it for yourself. At least us, and we're a little smaller here at AgentSync than Pi, but we are still kind of building processes and frameworks and structures for how we do things. And so if that's something that you enjoy doing and are good at, you can help us do that here. But it also creates this flexibility in this point in time to do things in a really unique way. I think on the other side of that, things to keep in mind if you're doing that is that there's a lot of change and ambiguity, and you need to be comfortable with that. So if you're coming from a larger company wanting to get into a startup, I think being able to acknowledge that. One of our values that we talk about at AgentSync is speed over perfection. We are moving really fast, and we're going to have to iterate to get where we need to go. And being really comfortable with that and having stories of how you've done that is really important for us. So I think those are probably the big things. And I don't know if that's consistent for all larger companies versus startups. I think a lot of larger companies, you're iterating on processes and structures and frameworks still, but at scale, and it's not from the beginning. So there's just a little more nuance there.
Awesome. Thank you both.
I'm gonna add one more thing,
yeah,
Heather.
Go for it.
I had like a shower thought this morning, sort of around this topic. But and I've seen this happen over the past 9 months. I've been at Pi's. In a growth stage company, a startup stage company, there are new roles that are being created constantly. And as you know, as much as hiring leaders and recruiting leaders and HR and people leaders try and get to a very clear picture as to what the scope of a role is going to be, what the responsibilities of that new job are going to be, there's always going to be this sort of this gray area, this undefined area. So I was thinking about it in the sense of interviewing for a role that maybe is not super defined. And one thing that I think you can do as a candidate is to use your experience to, and again, this is assuming that you're not interviewing or applying to an entry level role, but use that past experience to sort of help, guide a hiring leader, right? Like from my experience, this has worked well, or I would recommend approaching this way, or this system or this tool was very successful at a past job. We migrated from this to this, right? Sometimes, a lot of the times, if not all the time, you're hired for the experiences that you can bring to a company, right? You have the, work ethic, and some of these qualifications, whether it's, technical qualifications or whatnot, but most of the time it's that experience that you can bring. So if you can kind of showcase and highlight that in an interview, specifically at a growth stage startup, I think that's, that will really kind of help you stand out.
Awesome. Thank you. I just saw a question come in from the audience, which I think is a great one. So any advice for women with gaps in career due to raising children and trying to get back into the workforce? How do you present that? And are there any tips that you have for folks, both for gaps due to raising children, or maybe just a gap in general? I see, Lizzie, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I feel pretty passionately that companies should really stop looking at gaps as reasons not to consider people, period, every time. It doesn't matter what the story is. Mad props to the moms and parents out there, especially doing this through COVID. I have a 3-year-old. But I think you can tell that story. I've seen some really awesome LinkedIn profiles of took time off to parent, but you can also be more vague. You can call it a sabbatical. There's a story there and you don't have to share it, but know that I think there's a lot of people who relate to that. And I think the more we as companies and people in the hiring space can stop just looking at that. And when we hear people notice that, just say that that's a really historically biased way of looking at people's experience. So I don't look at that at all. So I think that's probably my biggest point there. But also, if you are coming back to work, find people to advocate for yourself. I think some of the tips from earlier will really come into play there if maybe you have a couple years of a gap. So really be clear about what your intention is, build connections with people so they can advocate for you to come in there. And I think you'll find a lot of companies, our two founders, Jen and Niji, they had their first child a week after I joined, and AgentSync is full of parents with young kids here. So I think also look for those signs that you'd be supported too, because I think that's very telling about companies. So I see nodding. Sorry, I'll stop. I can keep talking about this all day, but yeah, we do not look at gaps on resumes here.
Awesome. I'm sure that's great news to a lot of the folks in the audience. And Dan hit on this a little bit earlier about it being sort of a mutual interview. So we know candidates really should be interviewing the company as much as the company is interviewing the candidate. What questions are you looking for candidates to ask you about yourself, the role, the company, the team they're going to be working for? What advice do you have for folks there? I will start with Dan here.
Cool. Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I touched on this a little bit earlier. Honestly, I think that I wouldn't say any specific questions, but more so clarifying questions are extremely important, specifically around like expectations of a role. And, when I talked about, as hard as hiring managers try to nail down the specifics of what they're looking for and who they're looking for, when you're in an interview, if you can sort of tailor your response to a question by asking clarifying questions, that's going to help you really kind of get into the very specific details as to what an interviewer is trying to accomplish. Ideally, the questions are structured in a way that they get to that, from the start. So if someone says, well, tell me about a project that, didn't come to fruition, you might want to ask clarifying questions around, well, is this specifically within, if you're interviewing for a recruiting job, do you want me to think about something that is specific to recruiting, or can it be from outside project work? I also think it's important to take your time. And we had this recently, actually. We hired someone on Heather's team, and there was some feedback around, well, this person, really stopped and was very, very thoughtful about how they were answering questions, which led to a little bit of a gap between the question being asked and them answering. That's fine. If you need to kind of just kind of let it sit with you for 10, 15, 20 seconds. Make sure you're kind of going through your mind. Obviously, hopefully you came prepared with some examples in mind, but be thoughtful, be intentional, take your time, ask clarifying questions. To reiterate, this is just as much about you knowing if this role is the right fit for you as it is trying to nail that interview. So that would be my advice.
Julie, do you want to jump in on this one too?
Yeah, Dan kind of hit the nail on the head. It's very important to me, especially for my team, to make sure that it's a good fit on both sides. I never want to set somebody up to fail. And Pi is a great place to work. I love my job. I love this company, but it's not for everybody. And that's something that we want to kind of dig into through the interview process to make sure you're going to be as happy on this team as we're going to be having you. So asking those clarifying questions, making sure you have good examples. It's all digging into just making sure it's that good fit.
Yeah. I would also, I'd say for a earlier stage, growth stage company, I always like, being asked about a future state, right? Like what do you see either the team or the role, evolving to over the next 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months, 12 months? For me, personally, I'm always thinking about like, what are the possible kind of growth opportunities in a role for the team. So I think it's always interesting, putting myself in the candidate's shoes. I'd love to learn about what that hiring leader's sort of vision is for the future, because hopefully you're trying to approach this as an opportunity that you're going to be in, for a longish period of time. I know it's rare these days, but one other piece of advice.
Thank you. I know we have a couple of audience questions. I'm going to try to get through some of our content, and then we'll try to hit all of those audience questions towards the end here. But I'll ask, how do you manage the negotiation and offer process in a transparent and thoughtful way when you have multiple interviews and or multiple offers? And then along with that, how do you know what you're worth? And if you don't think that that offer is going to fit for you, what's the best and most respectful way to maybe ask for more? Lizzie, I'll start with you here.
Yeah, so I think it's a tricky process. I think people get very nervous advocating for themselves, especially if you've come from a historically marginalized background or you're not used to asking for yourself, asking for money. But I would say what's really cool in Colorado is Colorado pay transparency. So every company has to post a range. And even if you're thinking you might be a little outside that range, I think you're able to now here ask the company to share numbers first. I mean, we kind of have already, but I think manage that, be transparent if you have other companies that you're talking to or other offers. I think the best offer conversations I've had have been with people who are willing to be as transparent with me as I am with them. And it really just sets this great place for us to figure out if joining is the right thing for you, how you make sure numbers make sense. I'd say always ask if you want more, or even if you're really content. It depends on how that conversation with the recruiter has gone. But if you're thinking you should ask for more, ask. No one's ever taken, I don't know any company that has ever decided, how dare you, you asked for more, I'm no longer giving you an offer. So ask. The worst thing we have to do, and I tell candidates this, is I have to say no, because when I told you I'm gonna give you the best offer I can, I meant it. But ask just ask. That way, if you join, you know that you advocated for yourself, you got the best offer, and you can just feel really good about doing your job there and having a great career experience rather than worrying about money. So I think just be transparent throughout the whole process. And ask for money if you want more money.
I love it. Jilly, do you want to add anything here?
Yeah, we actually just went through with my team a pretty robust round of interviews where we had some really, really stellar candidates and only a couple spots open. And a lot of what's important on our side and the candidates is just being open with your recruiter, letting them know, like you guys said, if you're talking to other companies, if you have deadlines to accept other offers, because in my experience at Pi, if we have those situations and it's somebody that we really want, we will make things happen fast to get them our offer so that they can make that decision for what's best for them and their family. Because like we said, at the end of the day, it's about making sure it's a good fit for everybody. So just communicate.
Awesome. Dan, how about you? Do you want to add anything here?
I think there's a lot of really good points. Lizzie said this, it's really tricky. I think about this all the time. I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, I wish we were in a world where you could just say, well, I'm going to just get the best offer that this company could give me. It's not as simple as that. I think that as a candidate at the offer stage, at the negotiation stage, the more questions, the better. As Lizzie and Jolie said, I love our Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. I think it's great to be able to see a pay range. Not all Colorado companies are following the law right now, unfortunately. So if they're not, you should ask. But I also think it's important to understand, what factors are involved in coming to, a compensation package. I can tell you for Pi, we look at internal parity. So we look at our current employees, we look at external, market factors. And then we have compensation tools that we look at that has, market data that compares pie from a company size, kind of growth stage perspective against similar companies nationwide. So understanding what that sort of comp philosophy looks like can help you understand, why a company maybe, got to the compensation package that they did. But I'll just reinforce, reiterate Lizzie's comment. It can't hurt to ask for more. I also think it's personally okay to be open with your network. Ask other people, ask questions, talk to your friends. Other people might disagree. I just think that you need to be thinking about yourself. And, if it's $5,000-$10,000, that's going to, make a difference for you and kind of get you to that next level in your career. And based off of market factors, based off of conversations you've had, you feel that that's where, you should be from a salary standpoint. Have the conversation. Also know what the other benefits are going to be. Understand potential, compensation for bonus. Look at benefits. I have a 2.5-year-old kid. A family medical plan costs a lot different than an individual plan. Those are all factors that come into thinking about compensation. So ask those questions. But yeah, advocate for yourself.
Dan, going off of that, Jamie's asking, are there any suggested tools or resources to source company data regarding a compensation range? What would you recommend there?
Yeah, there's a lot of there are a handful of sort of public, kind of tools out there. I feel like what is it, Levels is a new one that I've seen where a lot of people share anonymous data. Team Blind is a resource where it's interesting, take some of it with a grain of salt, right? And it's, we're getting to this more distributed sort of environment, but there are geographic market conditions, right? There's typically going to be a higher, compensation in higher cost of living cities. So think about that. But yeah, Levels, I think it's levels.fy and Team Blind, Glassdoor, has compensation information. But at the end of the day, in Colorado, you should be able to go to a job description and see what that pay range is. I will just say, that pay range is a range for a reason, right? And know that. So look at the requirements, have confidence in yourself. But if you look at a lot of Pi's job descriptions, we don't have a set, range of 3 to 5 years. We typically don't want to limit, like create this box around a job, but we may have a minimum years, and that a lot of the time is a hard requirement. And that has changed over the past 9 months with equal pay for equal work because there are very kind of strict guidelines around internal promotions, transfers between departments, posting jobs. And so we need to be very, very clear in our expectations. I'll stop there. That was long-winded.
No, you're good. That's all really good information. Okay, I'm going to get to one more question here, and then we will go over to all of our audience questions. But if you had a single piece of advice for candidates as they look for their dream job at a startup, what would it be? And I'd love to hear from each of you on this. And Mark, I'll start with you.
Single piece of advice. This is going to Dan's point of pausing for a second and thinking about a response. I think using your network is something that is very important. Someone that can advocate for you. We've all talked about this already. But I think it's super important to be prepared, ask the right questions, be intentional about your approach. And so what you're targeting, it could be comp, it could be the type of company, the industry. Be intentional about all of those things. The market is like it's never been before. It's been many decades since it's been like this. And so the candidate, there's a luxury for the candidate, I guess you could say, because you can be so specific and picky and choosy at the same time. Hopefully, many options will come to you. Options are good. Options are never a bad thing, especially when you're looking for a new role or comparing and contrasting in the job market. So I think what I would say, again, I know it's kind of cliche, but at the same time, be intentional about what you're doing, be specific, whether it's in your resume or your cover letter. Looking for a job is a full-time job in and of itself. And so creating tailored resumes and cover letters can take a lot of your time. But at the end of the day, it's a part art, part science. A lot of recruiting is just that. And so send one version this way, send another version that way, and make it a continuous development of your experience. And so I would just say be intentional about it, be a doer, reach out, be courageous, ask those questions, connect on LinkedIn. Another thing, Slack has so many different groups and communities that you can join. Just sign up for Slack. And then whether it's a people operations or it could be engineering or marketing, there's free groups to join and be a part of communities. So I think inserting yourself and being intentional about all those things would be the biggest piece of advice.
Thank you. Lizzie, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think take the time to, I think when you're in the thick of interviewing, it's easy to get caught up in the role and how you're pitching the company and what they're looking for. And I think more important than all of that is how you like to work and if you see good alignment there. Because it's awesome if you get the offer, but if you weren't able to get a sense of how you're going to work with the manager, how they think about collaborating, what their expectations are of you, and that could be from like a work-life balance perspective, but also just how they work. And a lot of that you can find from culture and values, which many companies wrap in as focus areas to their interviews, but make sure that like really resonates you. Understand what that means. I think there's some companies that have some values that if you read into them might give you a tone of how they work and what their expectations are. So just clarify and make sure that you're going to be set up for success there and that you like really take the time to talk about that. I think that's probably my biggest one is make sure it's like focus on the fact that you're interviewing them too, and make sure it's actually somewhere you want to be, that you've gotten a sense that you would have fun. I think someone I was talking to talked about beyond have to get compensation right, the role needs to be right, but then it's the fun factor of like, how much fun is this going to be with the people I get to work with? Do I like them? Are the values aligned? It's the fun factor. So I guess that's really it. Shout out to the person who said that to me. But yeah, think about fun factor. I think that is probably the most important.
Awesome. Julie, what would you say here?
Kind of piggybacking on what Lizzie was just talking about, because I does panel interviews, I'm sure a lot of other companies do. So when I do hiring screens, I always tell candidates, hey, you're going to get to meet a lot of the team, get to know these people that you're going to be spending the majority of your time with. It's as important to us that you're a good fit on the team as that you know how to do the job, and asking the team those questions of, what the day-to-day is like, stuff like that is really important. But I think for me, and I'm going to slightly contradict what Dan said earlier, so don't get mad. People should make the decision whether or not to apply for a job based on whether or not they meet every single requirement in that job description. And this kind of goes back to what Lizzie was talking about earlier. Traditionally, marginalized people, be it, women, people of color, stuff like that, have a tendency to hold back applying for a job if they don't meet every single requirement because we feel like I don't have what it takes. But if it says, 3 years of management experience in an insurance environment, and I have 7 years of experience in management in mortgages and call centers, that's still relatable experience. And one of the things I always like to tell people is a lot of skills are transferable, even if you haven't found a way to use them in a different environment yet. So shoot for the stars.
Dan, how about you here?
I think that my number one piece of advice would be make educated decisions. And I think that sort of reinforces, some of the previous comments around asking the right questions, doing your research. Just, if you finish in an interview, follow up if you didn't get questions answered that you really feel like you need to have, had answered to make that educated decision. And just be confident in your abilities. I think, I really think that, think about what you're passionate about and bring that into the interview, bring that into the conversation. Because when you talk about something that you're passionate about, it's pretty, a lot of the time it can be pretty clear and evident. And at a startup, when things are super fast paced and changing, and it's not always easy, you have to be passionate about what you're doing, or else, to Lizzie's point, you're not gonna have any fun. And you're spending a lot of time in the work environment, and it's important to be having fun.
Awesome, thank you guys.
Billy, the one other thing, because you had mentioned, you talked about requirements. I agree. I don't think that you should, if it's a 2 years cutoff, oh, I only have a year and 9 months, right? I do think that a lot of companies, including Pi, were approaching the sort of requirements conversation and making a lot of things preferred, because we don't want to, lose out on someone who doesn't have a years of experience, sort of that we're looking for. So that's a takeaway. Look at the job descriptions, look at the way that companies are approaching the language in the job descriptions, because it probably will kind of give you a sense as to the culture of that company as well.
Awesome, that actually answered one of our questions from the audience, so thank you for that. We did get a couple of questions about looking for a job, maybe when you are 40 or 50, and how to handle that. Let's see specific language here. So how to position themselves in the job market. Do you omit years of experience? Try to downplay years of experience? What is your advice for those folks? And Lizzie, I can see you on your talk here. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think I'm sad that this question has to come up, because that makes me feel like we haven't done a good job as companies being inclusive and being able to think creatively about how people can bring their skills. For those of you who are asking for that advice, who you've either spent time at bigger companies and want to get into the startup world, or you're wondering how to make your resume readable for people, I think focus on the highlights of your career. Try to keep your resume 2 pages. I know best practice is generally 1, but when you have a breadth and depth of experience, but kind of use your work history, but think about the highlights of your career and talk about that. Same for the question with coming from a bigger company into a startup, that large company experience and seeing the direction that this startup needs to go, of like, okay, I've seen what this scale looks like here. Call that out. If you've worked for a company that's 5,000 people and you were employee number 300 and you've been on that growth journey, that's amazing experience for any stage startup. So I think of it in that lens of what's the story and what have been your career highlights. Some of the early career experiences, I've done this on my resume, they're less applicable for what I'm doing more recently. And I want more time on my resume to really have several bullet points around what I've been working on more recently. So I think that's how I would focus it. But if anyone has more specific questions, reach out. I'm happy to help you with that.
Yeah, I'll just answer really quickly. I think there's no need to omit, your experience, but make, recent experience and relevant experience, highlighted in your resume. There's that. And then the one question around how can an entrepreneur looking to return to being an employee, make that attractive, explain the shift. We're pretty much at time. I think, because I saw this question earlier, pick out the pieces of the work that you've done as an entrepreneur and highlight that. I think specifically, as a entrepreneur, you started a small business, there's probably a ton of project management work that you've had to do, right? And you maybe are applying to a project management position. Focus in on that, or if it's fundraising and it's that's more related to the role that you're applying to, so just get very specific in terms of the work that you've done and how that relates to the job that you're applying to.
Awesome. I know we are right at time and I want to be respectful for everyone who's attending more sessions at Denver Startup Week. So thank you so much to our panelists. It doesn't look like that specific link worked, but please email us careers@pieinsurance.com and we will get everyone's contact information to you. I apologize for not being able to answer all of the questions here, but thank you for being such an engaged audience and have a wonderful week. And thank you so much to our panelists.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.